The following accounts have been submitted by subscribers. These stories are claimed to describe true events. I ask you to listen in good faith and decide for yourself what to believe. The events I'm about to describe took place in Fraser Valley, British Columbia, Canada. It was October 2010 and I was 16 years old. At the time, my friend lived in the northwest rural part of my city. The whole area was blanketed by forest, with 5 acres of his backyard being dense trees. In the distance, there were only a few other houses, all situated on the outskirts of this forest. Me and him would go and explore the forest all the time, because it was quite mystical and just a cool place to wander. One time, me and my friend went outside to the forest with his dog, like we would usually do in the daytime. This time, however, it was night in his backyard forest, around 1 a.m. We went to go explore and smoke together, all like usual. Well, that was our intention. We didn't even get to smoking. What we experienced that night, sober and alert, terrified us so much we ended up smoking inside in his basement room. When you first walk into the forest, there's a steep cliff made out of forest floor. It's about 20 to 25 feet into the forest area from the tree line. The only safe way to walk down to the rest of the forest and the creek at the bottom, especially at night, was by taking a pathway which began at the top of this cliff. Me and my friend were standing at the top before the pathway when we saw something strange about 30 to 40 feet away in between the trees. It was a figure, pure white and soft looking, 7 to 8 feet tall and shaped like an upside down U or V. It moved around softly, swaying left to right, back and forth slowly, standing on the forest floor. There was no light nor moon shining in the forest that night. It was filled with tall pine trees and other thick vegetation of various levels. There was just it, this white, long-limbed thing, making absolutely no sound, swaying in the exact same place the whole time we saw it. It was so white it almost looked like it was shining, but it wasn't. It wasn't giving off any light of any sort, or illuminating the ground or trees around it. It was ghostly, but not see-through. Solid white, solid all the way through, so much so that I could see the shadow it cast on the ground as it swayed in the pitch-black forest. It had no facial features or head at all from what I could see in the dark. There was absolutely no wind, but yet it swayed. I stood waiting for my friend to say something. We observed it for a couple of seconds in complete silence, mesmerized by its movements. I was able to ask my friend if he saw it, and he said yeah, he could see it as well. We continued standing in silent fear as we watched it do its strange, unsettling, soft, swaying motions, trying to adjust our eyes to see the being and see what it was doing. Its movements were psychedelic, hypnotic. It was beautiful, astonishing, almost angelic even to look at, and yet terrifying and unsettling at the same time. As I was in a daze. Watching it move, I started to feel an ominous energy set in, a feeling of impending doom, that sinking sensation in my chest area, shivers going throughout my entire body. A life-threatening situation. That's when I told my friend specifically, I don't like this. He agreed and we left immediately. I wasn't so much scared of the sight of the being. I was curious about its strange movements and what it really looked like up close. I was scared of the feeling of death it made me feel. It made me feel like I was literally going to die. We had to leave. We left very quickly. Neither of us knew what it was. It scared us, and our intuition told us it was dangerous. My friend's dog was also scared. I am entirely positive the dog was whimpering. For all we knew, the being's movements could have been a lure of some sort because it did not move towards us or anywhere. Or perhaps it was just letting us know to stay away because it was scared to death as well. Whatever the case, it was literally something you would expect to see in a science fiction horror movie. For a long time afterwards, I did not know what to do about our experience. I can only describe it as paranormal, and it is one of the two most terrifying experiences I have ever had. I am 26 years old now, and it still scares me to this day. That night was the first time we ever went out to his forest at night. It was the last night we ever went out to that forest at night. Years of research has told me that there are absolutely no animals in northern British Columbia, the rest of Canada, or even the United States that look close to what we saw. There are absolutely no animals that are 7 to 8 feet tall and stand on 2 legs. I have explored all the options of what it could have been. The possibility of neighbours, garbage on the ground, even spider webs in the trees. I have even drawn the being and shared the image with others in the hope of finding some answers. Someone who is First Nations and lives in British Columbia, not too far from me, told me that he knew what it was right away. He told me the name of the being in his language and showed me their high status symbol for the being, a double-headed serpent. I was told to flip the symbol upside down because it represents these beings. Some incorrectly call these creatures night crawlers. I have learned they are known by different names by indigenous peoples across the Pacific Northwest. One is Sisiutl, a being which is considered to be a mediator between the natural and supernatural worlds, a shapeshifter, a night crawler, a supernatural being. This is the only paranormal experience I have ever had. I will never forget walking out of that forest that night. I will remember it for the rest of my life. Three years ago in the fall, my grandfather and I were out turkey hunting on a small piece of property my family owns in Kenner, West Virginia. My grandfather and I set up in a favourite spot of ours. We were sitting down when, only 20 minutes having passed, we heard one of the most blood-curdling screams I have ever heard. I remember turning to my grandfather and asking, "What was that?" He said he didn't know what it was. My heart sank. This man had 60+ years in the woods and wilderness. For him not to know was unusual, to say the least. We heard the same sound 2 more times, each time further away, until we couldn't hear it anymore. About 2 months passed and I was out hunting again, this time for deer. The experience with my grandfather had been forgotten until I heard it again. The same blood-curdling scream. This time, however, I had a creature to put the noise to. It was atop a hill about 100 yards away when I saw it. It looked like a guy. The only issue was, it was deer season. During deer season it is required to wear a vest coloured blaze orange. This guy, this figure, was brown and shaggy. I scoped onto it with my rifle. When I did, all I saw was a black shape where the face should have been. I immediately got the chills. It just continued walking across the hill, its movements jittery. Right as it started walking away, it let out another scream. I still hunt in those woods. I haven't seen it or heard it since, but I will never forget. I live in Utah, on the foothills of the Wasatch Mountains. The town I grew up in was a farm town, but has grown exponentially in recent years. So much so that it was hard to find any sort of nature aside from going into the mountains directly. There was a place, however, that a friend of mine once told me about. A place he had found that gave him the creeps. My best friend, Kiefer, and I were very much interested in the unknown and paranormal, and so we went to check it out together. Just off the Alpine Highway, there was a wealthy neighbourhood on a hill. At the base, there was a small turn-off where the mail was delivered. Hiding behind overgrown bushes was an old wooden bridge, large enough for a car to fit. Whilst a car did fit on the bridge, how old the structure seemed. You would think driving a car on it would collapse it for sure. It didn't. And even though this turn wasn't that far from the main road, After crossing that bridge, everything fell silent, as if we were taken back to a much simpler time. My friends and I were drawn to this place, almost like an addiction. It was quiet and calm. Any stress we had was left at that bridge. It was a strange place on the other side. A small winding path with thick brush on each side led us to a clearing. So quiet, so calm. In the center of the clearing there was, strangely, a large humanoid figure made from what looked like bits of scrap metal welded together. The head was the shape of a bird, but everything else was human. When we looked around, we realized there were these metal figures of varying sizes everywhere, welded together, placed about the clearing. Trees obscured a couple, making them appear as if they were hunting us. We wondered who or what could have made these things. Later, Kiefer said that, since they were metal, they were probably shiny when originally made. We had seen some raccoons near the bridge, and, as they love shiny things, we dubbed the area the Raccoon People place. In that clearing, aside from the metal figures, there was an old swing that had half decayed, a tractor that was probably more rust than anything else, and there was also a trail that led away from the clearing. We hadn't taken it. We wanted to explore the clearing and felt as if we were safer there in the clearing than going beyond that place. After that, we would go there constantly. Bored, we would go to the Raccoon People place. Wanting an adventure, we would go to the Raccoon People place. We were consumed by the urge of wanting to be there. The peace and tranquility we felt whilst there was something I'd never felt before or since. It was as if negativity simply didn't exist there. We'd go there for months. Even in the dead of winter, when the snow nearly blocked the bridge, we made it. Then, one time when we were there, the feelings changed. The peace we felt turned to unease and a feeling as if we were being watched. Strange noises seemed to echo about the clearing, but we never found the source. More than once we thought the metal figures had moved. This was before smartphones and we didn't think to take a camera. Looking back, I wonder what we would have found if we had. It was late summer and we kept glancing at that trail. Something inside of us seemed to be telling us to approach it, to enter it, to follow that trail and see where it led. It was time. We ignored the feeling and went home. However, that night the four of us were all itching to go back and check it out. We had to see what was beyond the trail. The next day, we agreed to go. The trail opened into a field. In the distance, we could see a couple of collapsed homes. But what got our attention was to the right of us. A wide spiral staircase carved into a boulder, leading to a chapel atop the hill. What was still standing of the building looked like it was on the brink of collapse. Kiefer and I agreed to go check it out. His brother and our other friend refused, saying it would be our funeral. We left and entered through the door half off its hinges. There were chains dangling from the ceiling. The seats had all been turned over, and there seemed to be a stage on the other side of the room. The stage extended outward, creating a lip. We couldn't see what was under the stage. The darkness was too much. It was then that the both of us suddenly felt like we were being watched. More than that, more than being watched, like we were on the brink of being attacked. The chains above us started to rustle, and a deep voice shouted, "Get them!" We heard a growling from under the stage. Kiefer and I ran. The growling chased us. We heard paws of some sort of beast hit the ground as it got closer. Kiefer's brother and our friend followed suit, asking what we were running from. We didn't answer. We just kept running. Looking back, there was nothing there, but the growling continued. It didn't stop until we had crossed the bridge. We agreed to go home, and we never wanted to come back to this place. We were no longer welcome. That night, Kiefer and I sneaked out of our homes and were just hanging out with friends. We were outside when we saw it, a shadow figure just beyond where the light reached from the nearby street light. This scared us, as everyone saw it. We left in a panic. Something, it seemed, had followed us from that place. For the next 3 days, out the corner of our eyes, in the reflection of mirrors behind us, we would see that shadow figure. And then as suddenly as it had appeared, it stopped. A month later, Kiefer was in a car accident. He died on impact. I was so lost. I drove around for hours trying to escape the pain of his loss. Around midnight the day of his accident, I found myself at the site of his death. There was still broken glass and car parts everywhere, and there I saw the shadow figure. It vanished as headlights hit it. Ever since, I have had this figure follow me. I have shared my encounter from time to time over the years, but have always been met with disbelief. I cannot fault them. If it were not for having experienced the events myself, I too would doubt them. I have been involved in the church my entire life, being a Bible teacher and pursuing various degrees in biblical theology. I was never one to have a wild side. On multiple occasions I have been told that I was born old, or that I am an old soul. My encounter happened to me in my early 20s, when I was going through a severely trying time in my life. My faith was in a dismal spot, and part of me was searching for validation that there was something that existed beyond our mortal senses. During a difficult time of introspection, I developed a rather severe interest in the paranormal. I began reading and watching anything that pertained to the subject. A friend of mine informed me about the Knox County poorhouse in Ohio. My friend told me that the building was renowned for being terrifying and was supposedly haunted. She told me that we would have to sneak into the building, as it is officially off limits and patrolled at night by the cops to keep teenagers out. The building has a long, dark history, both throughout its tenure as a poorhouse and later, when it was converted into a fake ghost house in the 80s and 90s and declared too dangerous to stay open. The building was condemned and has sat empty ever since. I made my fateful trip to the building in 2006. The allure of a building that could hold the paranormal was too strong for me to resist. I was in college at the time and working 2 jobs, but I managed to pull some strings and get a Sunday off and made the 3-hour trek to Knox County. I met up with my friend around noon, and we arrived at approximately 2:30 p.m. I remember laughing to myself as we pulled onto the dirt road that led to the poorhouse, as it reminded me so greatly of a haunted mansion from the Munsters or the Ghost and Mr. Chicken movies I had watched with my grandfather. Most of the doors and windows were boarded up. My friend, who was local to the area, appeared to be unsettled by the situation, as she had not been at the site since it was a ghost house open to the public. I coaxed her out of the car and we began walking about the back of the building. I was rather awestruck, as the pictures had not done the place justice in displaying just how massive the building was. We finally found a door in the back that had been knocked off its hinges, and I knew I could make it in. My friend immediately chickened out. She had assured me that the cops rarely patrolled the area until it was dark, and at this point I had at least 4 hours until it was dark. After a couple of minutes of trying to convince her to come with me, I told her to just hang out or go for a drive for a while, and I'd call her when I was done checking the place out. Even though it was daylight, I still wanted to check the place out. She agreed, but she told me she'd just wait in the car. As I made my way into the building, I was not disappointed by the creep factor of the first floor. Since almost everything was boarded up, I had to use a flashlight to see a couple of feet in front of my face. Time began to get away from me as I walked up and down the halls and corridors of the poorhouse. I had never seen a place like this. I wasn't sure how much of this was because it was untouched from its days as a ghost house. There were a lot of demonic spray paintings on the walls, and generic Halloween novelties still left in disarray around on the floors. I began to lose any sense of fear as I made my way up to the center of the building on the first floor. There was a major obstacle that blocked off most of the first floor, as the third floor foundation had given way in the center and collapsed all the way down to the first floor. I continued on and found a stairwell that was still intact. The cave-in blocked off much of my ability to navigate. However, I did make it to the attic area of the building, and as a makeshift planting a flag on Mount Everest, I took my gum out and slapped it on a windowsill at the top, as if to say, I've been here, done this, and wasn't impressed. That said, I will admit that I was a little unnerved by the attic of the building. There were a lot of school chairs and desks just stacked in an odd fashion, and the light from the attic window cast disturbing shadows on the far walls. I discounted this as nothing more than nerves and made my way out to my friend. Once I got out, I checked the time and realised that almost 2 hours had gone by. My friend was a mix of shocked, annoyed, and intrigued about what I had seen in there. I quickly gave a summary of the place and how hauntingly beautiful I thought it was, but that I did not get the feeling that it was haunted. She asked me what I thought of the basement. I was stumped. I told her that I thought I'd searched the place from top to bottom, but apparently I had missed the entrance to the basement. I pleaded with her to show me where it was, and she consented to go a short distance in and show me. Sure enough, just behind the stairwell, there was a 3-foot square cut into the wood floor. It was easy to miss. The time was getting late, so I quickly got ready to explore the depths of the poorhouse. The basement was closer to being a crawl space, and it is a good thing because the stairs ended about 3 steps down. I dropped the rest of the way and was immediately greeted by all the dread and fear that had been eluding me till this point. It felt as if I had walked into a room and a group of people who hated me with a visceral hatred had rushed me and put their faces in mine. The darkness was stifling in the basement. I could feel a suffocating presence in my face, and I painstakingly fumbled for the light to my flashlight. When I turned it on, I was greeted by nothing. In the darkness, I could not be sure that someone or something was not staring into my soul. Adrenaline coursing, I felt ready to fight. I went about 5 feet in front of me and noticed that the area hooked to the left. When I turned the corner, I was relieved to see that the rest of the crawl space rested beneath the cave-in from the floors above. I quickly, without thinking, turned and sprint crawled, if that's a word, to the broken stairwell. Anxiety and fear was clawing at my back, and I quickly jumped and pulled myself up from the darkness. I had the severe fear that something was about to grab my feet as I made my way out. My friend and I quickly made our way out as I told her that I was wrong, and that I felt that place did have something very evil and wrong residing inside the basement. It was the first time in many years that I felt true fear and evil so close to me. Now for the real creep factor. I went home that night and thought about all that had happened. I had forgotten my father was away on a business trip, and it was just me and my brothers at home with my mom. I arrived home rather late and spent only a few hours talking with my mom and brother before heading to bed. That night, as I lay in bed, I was awakened by the door to my bedroom opening and the light coming on. God as my witness, I swear I saw this thing. I am not sure what it was, but I will try and describe in words what I saw. It had a red hood on, but its face and hands were visible. It was extremely gaunt, and its skin was a charcoal, ashy colour. Immediately I was drawn to its eyes, or where its eyes would have been if it had any. The eye sockets drooped low, as if something was pulling them down, and in the blackness it felt as if it was staring at me. Its fingers were long and gnarled. The fingers were hanging in front of it as it crept into my room. It had a smile as it kind of walked or lurched its way in. The face is burned into my memory, and even so many years later, when I close my eyes, I can still see it, smiling at me. I backed as far as I could into my bed to the pillow. The bed is roughly 5 feet from the door, and the closet is approximately 10 feet from that door in the adjacent corner. My bed faces both doors. I say that because, without taking its eyes off me, it went to the closet door, fumbled with the handle, opened the door, went into the closet, smiled at me one last time, and then shut the door. The fear, the crushing fear I felt was palpable. I prayed and I prayed. I was in disbelief. I had to be lucid dreaming. I immediately began to rationalize away the horror I had just seen. I was terrified though. I wanted to scream for help, but I was terrified that it would burst out of the closet and come after me. The early hours of the morning came, and I managed to doze off once it felt as if it was gone. It was Monday at this point, and I had an early class. I was off to class, and through a defense mechanism, I had tucked away the trauma and discredited it to nothing more than a lucid night terror. When I made it home from school that afternoon, my mother stopped me. She asked what I was doing in my closet last night. The blood drained from my face, and she could tell I was clearly trembling. She said that she had heard me open my closet and heard talking coming through the walls from my bedroom. My parents' room is on the opposite wall from my bedroom. I knew my mother had heard this thing in my closet. I have long since regained my faith in God, and my relationship with the Lord is stronger than ever. However, before I got to that point, for years I dealt with countless spiritual battles in my life. I have not seen this thing since that night, though I have seen shadows that I thought could have been this thing. I have heard things walking through my parents' house in the years since, but nothing like what I saw that night. I tell my story now as I hope it can help someone who may be struggling with the supernatural. It is my theory that if you open yourself up to the paranormal and seek it out, it will eventually find you. Thank you for listening, and thank you to those who have kindly and courageously allowed me to share their experiences. Thank you also to our members for all the support that they show our work. If you have a real paranormal experience you would like me to narrate, you can submit your story via our website, paranormalscholar.com. The link is on screen now and in the description. And if you cannot wait until our next video, why not click the one suggested on screen now? Until next time.